These meetings being recorded by the host participants, except to vote. The account owner can also watch
We're
this
going to go ahead and get started, folks.
local thing by staying in the meeting. You consent. I got it. No, not with that, right?
I mean, they know this.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't think so. We got it.
Zu will mir singen, wie es klappen unsere Herzen, mit Rhythm von euer Leben, herzlich zu. Wir seien euer Kinder, wir singen euer Lieder, zu Reich, wir seien da, we are here because of you. We'll tell your story, live your dreams, and sing your song. With courage, faith, and hope, with voices proud and strong. The world will know your life, your love, your legacy lives on. Herzlich zu, we will remember you. You're with us everywhere we go. We hold you safely in our hearts. We'll share with future generations all the lessons of your past, all your suffering and losses, all the pain that you went through will never be forgotten. Herzlich zu. We'll tell your story, live your dreams, and sing your song. With courage, faith, and hope, with voices proud and strong. The world will know your life, your love, your legacy lives on. Herzlich zu, we will remember you.
Sherwin, I'm just saying hello. Can you hear us? Can you hear me?
Yes.
We have cried in all our tears the sadness of your darkest years, but the joy in your survival gives us life. Wir wollen euch keinmal nicht vergessen, wir wollen euch ständig gedenken. Euch ewig will mir singen zu lieb euch. We'll tell your story, live your dreams, and sing your song. With courage, faith, and hope, with voices proud and strong. The world will know your life, your love, your legacy lives on. Herzlich zu, we will remember you. Herzlich zu, we will remember.
Good morning, everyone. I want to take a moment to thank you all for joining us this morning as Prineville Jewish Center hosts our International Holocaust Remembrance Day commemoration. For those of you who do not know me, my name is Zimbar Robbins, and I'm the executive director here at PJC. I am also the granddaughter of an Auschwitz Bergen-Belsen survivor. January 27th is designated by the United Nations General Assembly as International Holocaust Remembrance Day. Since 2005, the UN and its member states have held commemoration ceremonies to mark the anniversary of the liberation of Auschwitz-Birkenau and to honor the 6 million Jewish victims of the Holocaust and millions of other victims of Nazism. The same resolution supports the development of educational programs to remember the Holocaust and to prevent further genocide. The resolution not only establishes January 27th as International Day of Commemoration in memory of the victims of the Holocaust, it also rejects any form of Holocaust denial. The resolution encourages member states of the UN to actively preserve sites that the Nazis used during the final solution, such as killing centers, concentration camps, and prisons. Drawing from the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, The resolution condemns all forms of religious intolerance, incitement, harassment, or violence against persons or communities based on ethnic origin or religious belief throughout the world. The Holocaust profoundly affected countries in which Nazi crimes were perpetrated, but also had universal implications and consequences in many other parts of the world. Member states share a collective responsibility for addressing the residual drama, maintaining effective remembrance policies, caring for historic sites, and promoting education, documentation, and research 7 decades after the genocide. This responsibility entails educating about the causes, consequences, and dynamics of such crimes so as to strengthen the resilience of young people against ideologies of hatred. As genocide and atrocity crimes keep occurring across several regions, and as we are witnessing a global rise of anti-Semitism and hateful discourses, this has never been so relevant. This past summer, as a Governor's Council member of the Jewish Federation in the heart of New Jersey, I was asked to join a delegation to meet with New Jersey State Senator Vin Gopal to reintroduce a bill regarding the Holocaust mandate in New Jersey. I had an opportunity, along with others, to share my own experiences with the lack of adequate Holocaust education as experienced by my 3 children, as well as their own incidents of anti-Semitism. Since Lev Academy has the most robust Holocaust education program in the region for supplemental religious schools, I was asked to share our curriculum with the senator, who remarked that our program was a model by which all schools should look to. In the early fall, the delegation and I were privy to the first rewrite of the bill, which was to be presented on the Senate floor. Many suggestions were made to the bill until an acceptable and comprehensive new Holocaust education bill was ready for a vote. I am thrilled to report that right before the new year, that bill passed the House and Senate and is waiting to be signed into law by Governor Phil Murphy. This new bill will hold all school districts accountable for how, when, and what they teach beginning in 4th grade. School districts who fail to abide by the new measures will be required to submit a corrective action plan to remediate the issue. Senator Gopal stated in an article in Jewish Link, "Over time, the Holocaust has become less and less real," he said, adding that during his visits to his grandparents in India, he would make it a point of stopping at a Holocaust site in Europe on the return trip. It's important that everyone understands the horror of the Holocaust. Anti-Semitic incidents rose to all-time highs nationally in 2021, according to an Anti-Defamation League's annual audit, with a total of 2,717 reported incidents of assault, harassment, and vandalism, representing a 34% increase over the previous year, with New Jersey recording the 2nd highest rate in the country. A 2020 survey on Holocaust knowledge and awareness among millennials and those in Gen Z by the Conference on Jewish Material Claims Against Germany found that 63% of all national survey respondents didn't know that 6 million Jews were murdered, and 36% thought that 2 million or fewer Jews were killed during the Holocaust. It also found that 48% couldn't name a single concentration camp or ghetto. The state-by-state analysis found New Jersey's youth knowledge to be somewhere in the middle of the pack. Although in 1994, New Jersey became the first state in the nation to require Holocaust education, there has never been any standardized curriculum, leaving each district to come up with their own teaching plan. In 2021, Arkansas, Wisconsin, Arizona, and Massachusetts became the 17th, 18th, 19th, and 20th states to require schools to provide Holocaust education. Alabama joined Pennsylvania and Washington in encouraging and endorsing Holocaust education. It's been 78 years since the Holocaust, and we still do not even have 50% of the country that mandates that this period of history be taught in our public and private schools. We at Prineville Jewish Center are proud of its Lev Academy Jewish enrichment program for students ages 8 to 13, and our ongoing commitment to ensure the next generation understands the past and remembers what so many gave up in the quest to remain dedicated to our heritage and faith. Our goal is to ensure that every student who completes our program has an in-depth understanding of this dark and tragic time in history of the Jewish people, and to develop a sense of pride and self-confidence in who they are as Jews, both in our local and global community. Only by learning of our past can we understand our present, and only by taking action today can we ensure our future. I'd like now to call upon Rabbi Shvelowitz to say a few words and to recite the Alma Lerachamim prayer.
Thanks, Simba. It was said when Imbar mentioned about how we see it. We talk about this in Hebrew school as we will try to present the Holocaust program every single year to the kids, Holocaust studies. And we watch young people from different places in the country who literally have no clue as to what happened. I was born several years after World War II. And so as an Ashkenazi Jew, which of East European descent, I was affected by that. And my family was affected by that, in that we lost many people on my grandfather's side and grandmother's side, grandfather's side, on my mother's side. And in Poland, and we presume Auschwitz. And I'm thinking, here's one Jew walking the face of the earth. And how many more cousins I could have had, how many more cousins my children could have had one Jew, me. And there are 6 million others. And who knows how many more than that? Because not everybody could have been counted. It just wasn't possible. And so I was also very fortunate that 34 years ago, when I came to the community, I was surrounded by many Holocaust survivors who had survived the war and came to Perineville to either start egg farms or do other things. And occasionally, on any given Saturday morning or some Friday night, or once in a while over a dinner at the person's house, or meeting the person on the street of Heightstown, I would be told things that till this day, as I sit here in this chair, not only affected me personally, but changed the course of my life. And it just changed the course of my life. But some of the things that some of the people told me. Private stories, stories of horror, stories of one man, and I'll just share this, and I'm not going to go on with this. One man actually told me that he lived in a small town in Poland, and the Nazis took him and all the people from the next small town in Poland, made them dig their graves, and the guy next to him told him, when they start counting, jump in. And somehow that man next to him knew that they were going to count. And he said when they got to 2 in German, he jumped in and survived and was able to crawl out in the middle of the night. But he had other issues, which I don't want to talk about, still winding up in some sort of a camp. Later on, he was caught and survived and came here. And he told me this one Saturday morning before services. He just, I don't know, started blurting this story out to me. And that was some of the stories I've heard. So I also found, and this is where I'm going to start my program this morning, that I never found two people in the community or anywhere else that I spoke, anybody else I spoke to, that felt the same way about their relationship with faith and their relationship with God. Some came out stronger, some came out almost very difficult in believing in someone above. But I found that the common denominator among all of them was that they had faith in being a Jew, and they were proud to be a Jew. And no matter what they believed or what they said or what they did, when it came to this particular prayer, two prayers, they all seemed to have wanted to join into, everyone. One was the Kaddish, and the second prayer is the Shema Yisrael. These are not on my particular program here, but I thinking about it before I turned the computer on here today. And I said, I think in any Holocaust situation, any remembrance situation, these are the prayers that we should say. And this was so important to them. I found no matter what they told me, what their sense of belief was, they always paid reverence to the Shema and to the Kaddish. And I'd like to do both of them. So I'm going to do the Shema. And if you can follow it along with me, I know probably not going to be able to get it on the screen. I will go slowly and I will read it in Hebrew. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad, Baruch Shein Kivod Malchuso, V'olam Va'ed, V'ahavta Es Adonai Elohecha, V'chol levavecha, U'v'chol nafshecha, U'v'chol miyodecha, V'hayu hadvarim ha'ele, Asher Anochi Mitzavcha Hayom Al Levavecha, V'shinanta levanecha, V'dibarta bam, V'shiftecha b'veisecha, V'lechtecha v'aderech, Uv'shachpecha uv'kumecha, Uv'shartam liot al yodecha, V'hayu letotafos b'nei anecha, Uv'savtam al mezuzot beitecha uv'isharecha. Hear, O Israel, the Lord is our God, the Lord is one. Praise be, glorious sovereignty, forever and ever. I'd like to read a meditation, a memorial prayer, and then if any of you want to join me for Kaddish, it would be appropriate as well. A meditation. Memory is the bridge that links the living and the dead. When we remember those who are no longer with us, their spirit continues to influence our lives. For that reason, we observe the rituals of mourning, Kaddish, and Yortzeit. The Kaddish is only one prayer in the entire service. However, it brings the million of the worship to a climax, proclaiming the majesty of God and assuring us his continuing care even in our sorrow. And the recognition of God's majesty implies the highest goals of living to which a human being may be summoned. Help us to cherish in loving and abiding memory the good which is in those whom we love and remember. May we honor them in our deeds and righteousness. May we be sustained with an all unfaltering faith in God's goodness today and always. The memorial prayer. God, full of mercy, who dwells on high, protectors of widows and father for the fatherless, please be silent and show no restraint on behalf of the Jewish blood that has been spilled like water. But grant perfect rest on the wings of your divine presence in the lofty abode of the holy, pure, and valiant, who shine as the brightness of the heavens to the souls of our brothers and sisters, 6 million plus Jewish men, women, and children who were put to death, slaughtered, burned, starved, buried alive, who suffered other forms of unnatural death at the hands of the Nazis and their associates. May their names be wiped out in Auschwitz, Badenach, Mauthausen, and in other death camps in Europe. Those who gave their lives in order to sanctify God's name, because we are at one with their memory, and we pray for the salvation of their souls. Their resting place shall be in God's Garden of Eden. The Master of Mercy shall take care for them under the protection of his wings, and by their soul the bond of everlasting life. Do not conceal their earth their blood, O earth, and let there not be a resting place for their cry. In the merit shall the remnants of this, which is the state of Israel, return to its rightful place. And as for the holy ones, their righteousness shall be in front of the Lord as an everlasting memory. They will come in peace and will rest in peace. They will meet their right destiny at the end of days. Let us say, Amen. I'd like to do Memorial Kaddish in memory of everyone who lost anyone in the Holocaust. And even if you haven't, which is so fortunate, please just join Kaddish along with us. Yiskadal v'yiskadash shemei Rabbah, v'yomah divrach Yerusei v'yamlich malchusei, v'chayechon u'v'yomechon u'v'chayei dechol beis Yisrael, v'agalah u'v'zman kariv yimru amen. Yehei shmei Rabbah mevorach li'olam u'lomei omayu. Yisparach v'yishtabach v'yispar v'yisromam v'yisnasei. V'yishadar v'yisalev v'yisalal shemei dekudisha b'richu. La'ela min kol berchasa v'shirasa tushbechasa v'nechamasa damiran v'yoma v'yimru amen. Yehei shlomo Rabbah min shemaya v'chayim aleinu kol Yisrael v'yimru amen. Oseh shalom b'ramav hu yaseh shalom aleinu kol Yisrael v'yimru amen. May everyone's dearly departed martyrs rest in peace. And again, may I make special recognition to the Holocaust survivors from the Primeval Jew Center, where unfortunately not one is left. We lost Bronya Tagner, who was our last survivor 2 or 3 years ago, and whose heart and soul was always in the synagogue and helped the community, us, myself, anybody else, services, cottages, yard sites, fixing pipes, doing whatever they had to do to help the synagogue survive for those of you who walk in the building today. A great part of that was because of them and their will to continue no matter what Hitler did to them or no matter what happened or what they lost. God bless all their souls, the souls of our dearly departed, and thank you for listening to me. Have a good day.
Rabbi. I'm going to now light the candle in memory of all those who perished and all those who have survived. Blessed is the match consumed in kindling flame. Blessed is the flame that burns in the secret vastness of the heart. We pause to light this candle, a symbol of the human spirit that fought to bring light through the darkness. This light will stand as a permanent marker as we honor their life and memory. The human soul is a light from God. May it be your will that the soul of the 6 million exterminated in the Shoah enjoy eternal life, along with the souls of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, Sarah, Rebecca, Rachel, and Leah, and let the rest of the righteous that are in Gan Eden. Amen. I'm going to share with you now the names that were submitted to me to be remembered today. For the family of Lynn Bender, Elaine, and Joe Strip, survivors. For the Millman family, Lionel Roth, survivor. For the family of Linda Gordon, Mitchell Gordon, survivor of Auschwitz, Buchenwald, and Flossenburg. For the Glansberg family, David, Malka, Chaya, Peril, Cyril, Razel, Labish, Mayer, Moisha, and Sender Morgenthaler, perished in Treblinka. Yehuda, Chaya, Leah, and Shmuel Langer, perished in Poland. Rose and Mordechai Morgenthaler, survivors. For the family of Ariella Hellman, Esther Waxblum, Warsaw Ghetto, Majdanek, and Auschwitz. For the family of Joyce Hetherington, Hannah, and Benjamin Magram, Benjamin never made it to the camps. He was shot along with his family in their home. For the family of Jerry Raber, Joseph Raber, Auschwitz. For my family, Malvina Kolb Weiss, Elizabeth Weiss, Abigail Weiss Freund, David Julius Weiss, Julius Arpad Freund, Gaston Auschwitz. Bushke Weiss, Imre Weiss, Joja Weiss Freund, and Malka Weiss Lovi, survivors of Auschwitz, all have since passed. For the family of Phyllis Schaefer, Alexandra White, Auschwitz. For the family of Anne Schumann, Bella Hostik Redman, survivor of Lodz Ghetto and Auschwitz. For the family of Melanie Smolin, Sirla Golda Pal, Yosef Pal, Sala Pal, Nachman Pal, Deborah Pal, Machel Halperin, Sarah Halperin, Leisure Hirsch Halperin, gassed at Auschwitz, Royal Pal, Gross Rosen, Ruchla Pal, Lodz Ghetto, Louisa Pal, Baila Blima Halperin, Chelmno, Slama Pal, Mauthausen. For the Tagner family, Lipa Tagner, Bronya Tagner, Malka Beitel, Solomon Beitel, survivors, all have since passed. They all spent the entire war in concentration camps in Poland. The family of Arlene Lazar, Irene Tannen. In memory of the 6 million Jews who perished at the hands of the Nazis and all who survived. For those who succumbed to acts of violence, Melvin Wax, Cecil Rosenthal, David Rosenthal, Jerry Rabinowitz, Bernice Simon, Sylvan Simon, Richard Gottfried, Rose Mallinger, Daniel Stein, Joyce Feinberg, Irvin Younger, Pittsburgh, 2018. For those who succumbed to acts of violence, Lori Gilbert Kay, Rabbi Yossel Goldstein, Almog Peretz, and Noya Dahan, Poway, 2019. For those who succumbed to acts of violence, Joseph Newman, brutally attacked with a machete while celebrating Hanukkah in his rabbi's home, Muncie, New York, 2019. In honor of Rabbi Charlie Citron Walker and the hostages taken by Malik Faisal Akram, Colleyville, Texas, 2020. In honor of those killed and injured in the recent attack on a synagogue in Jerusalem, the perpetrator of Saturday's attack was a 13-year-old boy, Jerusalem, 2023. I'm going to now hand over our presentation to our guest speaker today. Private Good Luck is the remarkable memoir of a teenage Jewish immigrant turned American infantryman in World War II, fighting on the front lines to defend his newfound freedom, champion the honor of his people, and save the family he left behind. It's not just an immigrant story. It's not just a soldier story, nor is it just a Holocaust story. Above all, Private Good Luck teaches the dignity of difference and will renew your faith in our shared humanity. Documented by extensive primary sources, many of which can be found exclusively in the hard and soft cover editions, it precedes and provides the context for an upcoming remarkably comprehensive online collection of correspondence, documents, photos, and artifacts at the U.S. Holocaust Museum in Washington, D.C. Please welcome today's speaker, Sherwin Gluck.
Inbar, thank you so much for the introduction. Thank you for having me.
No
Rabbi,
problem.
thank you for your words. I'm really very grateful to be here. Let me just get started. I'll share my screen. And okay, so hopefully you can all see that. Okay, so Millstone Township has nearly 10,566 residents. Numbers are going to be very important in what I discussed today. So I would ask you to think about your friends, your family, your neighbors, the people that you know within your local town and in your township as we go through the presentation. During the Holocaust, an average of 3,287 Jews were murdered every day for 5 years. I mean, let that sink in. It's just, you can't even begin to wrap your mind around such a number. That's a township the size of Millstone, New Jersey, murdered in just over 3 days. So every person you thought of, every person you were thinking about in your township, your friends, your neighbors, your family, gone in 3 days. And so I'm sharing my family's view of the Holocaust and World War II through their letters, through their correspondence back and forth, through the different sides of the family, those who were able to get out just in time from Europe and those who unfortunately remained. My family was from a small town in Czechoslovakia. Of course, Czechoslovakia doesn't exist anymore. It was broken in two, but where the arrow is pointing, it's on the border of Czechoslovakia and Hungary. You can see this is a map from 1938. So Poland was east of Czechoslovakia, and which is now Ukraine. So the small village still exists on the border of Czechoslovakia, Hungary, and Ukraine. My family were Hungarian speakers, and we're very glad to live in Czechoslovakia. Czechoslovakia at the time, after World War I, was a democracy. And as such, they were given many, many more freedoms and rights. And my dad would always speak of the president of Czechoslovakia as being a great man because he ensured for Jews the civil rights that had been lacking in many other countries. And life before the war, before World War II, this is a photograph of my family. They were farmers. You can see a lot of the detail in the picture. You can see the chickens in the foreground. This is my dad as a young boy, his two older sisters, and my grandmother. You see the thatched roof of the barn. On the right side of the screen, you can see a wagon wheel and the chicken coop in the rear. So they raised animals. They had mostly they raised horses for the army. They trained horses for the army. They had cows. They had chickens. They had ducks. It was almost a completely self-sufficient farm. They had wheat. They raised tobacco, which we would think would be a very good crop, but actually it was very taxed. It was very highly taxed. But they raised cabbage, potatoes, all varieties of food were raised on their farm. But my dad's second oldest brother, David or Dejo, was not wanting to be a farmer. He was a businessman, and he had it in his heart that he wanted to come to America. The town that they lived in Europe, Poyan, was too small. The next larger town, which was more of a small city, was too small. And he ran his business there, which was home goods, like blinds and things for the house. And it just was not what he wanted. And he convinced my grandfather to let him go to America. My grandfather already had 3 brothers in America. And one brother agreed to sponsor my Uncle David to come. And at the time, it just took 2 months to get a visa because in Czechoslovakia, like I said, it was a democracy. People were not trying to get out of Czechoslovakia. So the quota number was not full at all. And it was very easy for him to get his quota number and get the affidavit of support from his uncle in America already, Uncle Julius. And at age 26, he came to America. And this is the photograph that he took of my family before he left to America. So I'll just introduce, because we'll return to this photograph several times during the presentation. This is my dad here to the left. This is his uncle, Uncle Martin. This is my grandmother's brother with one of his sons, Shmuel, his daughter Magda. If you look on her leg, you'll see a brace. She suffered from polio. So that's pretty much foretelling what's going to happen to her. This is my grandfather, Jeremiah, and one of my dad's brothers, Herman. And so, as I said, this photograph was taken before my Uncle David came to America. And you see that they were religious Jews, not wealthy, but farmers and in a small village. So as soon as my uncle had come to America, his siblings, my dad and his 2 sisters and brother, also wanted to come to America, and they started doing the paperwork right away. So by March 1938, they had already started filling out paperwork to get the affidavit of support from their uncle and to come. And they were actually very, very close by August 1938 to having everything finalized. But in September 1938, as you know, the peace in our time agreement between the German dictator and England they had come to an agreement on lands that the German dictator was demanding. And so the Sudetenland, which was the northwestern part of Czechoslovakia, was returned to Germany. Now, the claim was that these were German speakers, that it was areas that were lost from Germany in World War I, that they wanted to come back and be part of Germany. But not only that, this was the main defensive area for Czechoslovakia. So by giving this land to Germany, it opened up Czechoslovakia. The industrial regions of Czechoslovakia were now open for German conquest. And this was very important, that Germany needed to have this for their war effort. Well, as soon as this agreement was completed with the Sudetenland, Hungary made claims against Czechoslovakia as well and demanded the Carpathian, sub-Carpathian region as well. This was areas that were lost also in World War I, and Hungary demanded it back. And my dad's village, again, like I said, was on the border of Hungary and Czechoslovakia and was part of this return to Hungary. And so now after having done all this paperwork to get their passports and their affidavit of support through Czechoslovakia, they were no longer Czechoslovakian. And for a time, they were actually considered stateless. And they were actually very happy because they felt that under Hungary, their lives would improve, because in Slovakia, they were subject to anti-Semitism. The Slovaks were almost a puppet government of their ally Nazi Germany. And so they actually went out when the Hungarian army came through their village, waving the Hungarian flag. And what were they told? Jews, you're not Hungarian. Put away your flags. We don't want you here. So what they had hoped would be a good thing started to become a very bad experience for them. Now, of course, today we think of what we're doing now. I'm here on Long Island. You're in New Jersey. We can communicate instantaneously. They had email. We have email. We can send messages, documents, pictures instantaneously around the world. In those days, they used letters, and it usually would take about 70 days for a reply to a letter sent overseas. So here, this is an envelope that that was written by my grandfather to my aunt. You can see the handwriting. Obviously, they were writing on, it was almost, the paper was like rice paper, almost as thin as a napkin, if you will. They did not have ballpoint pens. They were using fountain pens. So you can see how carefully, this is a letter from my grandfather, and how they would write and be careful not to smudge or let the ink flow too much on the paper. And they tried to get all the news that they possibly could into these letters: who was getting married, who died, who was moved out, what jobs they were doing, everything, all the news that was going on in the town. So I'm going to read a few letters. And I'm starting now. This is my father's oldest brother's children. He had 5 children, so you see only 4. One was born after this photograph was taken. But you see here the oldest, Emil, his sister Lenka, Mityu, and Gyula. And they were writing to their uncle, my Uncle David, their Uncle David as well, my dad's second oldest brother, shortly after he came to America. So I'll just read to you an excerpt from this letter. And this is written by Emil, the oldest. And he says, "Dear Uncle Dejo, I received the letter that I have been waiting for. Before I received your reply to my letter, I thought that you may not want to write to me. I began to be angry. However, I'm not angry now because you answered my letter. And my dear Uncle David, I want to thank you very much for wanting to send something for me. I'm really looking forward to receiving something from you. Tibby, my cousin, received something from his Aunt Bertha. So I'm also waiting for something. Lenku, my sister, and Mityu are happily looking forward to getting a package. I don't know what to write you this week. It was Purim, and I got 80 fillert. Fillert was like 80 cents. How did you spend your Purim? My dearest Uncle David, I hope that I can be in America also. I hope that God will help us, like you have been helped in doing everything to get out from here. There are a lot of people that would love to get out from here. I already know 15 words in English. I'm kissing you 1 million times. Your nephew, Irving Gluck." And then his sister writes, "Dear Uncle Dejo," you can see here on the bottom. Let me see if on the bottom, his sister writes, "Dear Uncle David, we are also kissing you, Lenka and Mityu." And so I would just, again, I don't know if there are young people watching, but here's the child, 8 years old. Look at his beautiful handwriting, the script. This was very much emphasized in our family, and I'm sure everyone else's family, education. Education is the most important thing. It can't be taken away from you. And to try to be as educated and well-learned as you could possibly be. And so what a beautiful handwriting for an 8-year-old. And even for a 4.5-year-old, look how she's trying to write. So they're certainly, even though they're farmers and living in the middle of a small village, education was prime. My grandfather writes to in the same letter, I think, maybe a month or two after, my grandfather writes to my uncle, to his son, "From my loving heart to my son, David, I was very happy to read your letter. Thank God that you are healthy and hope that my lines will find you in good health. On May 2nd, I traveled to Budapest. The Czech passport is not valid, so we will need a new passport. The agent said not to make the passport, even though we already began to make it, until he notifies us. Thus, we have to wait. Someone else was asking the travel agent, when will their time to travel come? He said, maybe 2 or 3 years. Best wishes and kisses, your true father that will never forget you, Jeremiah Gluck." Now, why 2 or 3 years? Because now they're Hungarian, and the Hungarian quota was actually almost full. So Jews that were in Hungary that wanted to get out, by 1939, it was already too late. Even if they had the money, even if they had the ability to get out, even if they had somebody in the United States who would give them an affidavit of support, this was already, the door for Hungarian Jews was closed. But my dad and his sisters, because they had already started applying for the passport under the Czechoslovakian government, they were allowed to use the quota number from Czechoslovakia. And that was the difference between life and death. So here we have photographs of my dad on the right, his brother Herman, sister Marie, and oldest sister Hermine. And they were, because they had the quota number from Czechoslovakia, they were able, after 2 years, again, they started in March of 1938 to get out. In February 1940, they were finally able to get out of Europe, which was really one of the last ships to leave Europe. They had missed their first ship, which was supposed to leave from Trieste, and they went by train and rushed. Instead of to Trieste, they went through Trieste to Naples and caught the same ship from Naples. You can see these are their passport photos. This one actually, I think, of my Aunt Hermine, this was a later photograph, but the first 3 are their passport photographs. An interesting story is that their passports, the boys, the passports were different than the girls' passports. For whatever reason, they were on different paper, different books. And for that reason, they were stopped in Italy and questioned, how is it that you boys are being allowed out? Because you're military age, the war has already started. If we remember our facts, right? September 1st, 1939, Germany invaded Poland. Jews in Poland and Germany were not allowed to travel by train. They were not allowed to leave the country. So that 2 young men of military age were leaving, raised red flags. So again, going back to the first picture I showed, this is my dad's uncle, my great uncle, his mother's brother. My grandmother, my dad's mother, passed away when my dad was 11. So her younger brother felt a very, very close kinship to her children, my dad and his brothers. And he writes to them after they arrived in America, "My dearest children, may you live to 120 with God's blessings. We have received your telegram and the 2 letters, the one mailed by regular mail and the one mailed by air. As soon as I received the telegram, I brought it to your father. Your telegram from Columbus came in first. My dearest children, I cannot write down the heartfelt feeling I felt as I remained by myself at the train station. I looked dazedly at the train as the train was leaving. I was there for a long time and my heart was crying. Will I ever see you again someday? These were my thoughts, and I couldn't walk with them in my mind. I was in such a daze that I didn't even know what people were saying to me. I am sitting alone in your empty house, and I miss you as much now as I did the day you left. I am reminded that my dear sister, your mother, is no longer alive. As I write to you, my heart feels the same as it did when she died. It felt the same way when we said goodbye at the station. Last week and today, your father and I cried together, feeling very lonely. But at least today, we also cried happy tears, because thank God you are safe and sound and in a good place. You are not alone because your family is there with you, and they have been very good to you. I hope that God will give you the best in everything. Please be good to each other and respect one another. Learn English so you can be a gentleman everywhere. Keep a kosher home, observe Shabbos, and pray as you did at home, because that's all we have. God will help us if we just follow our philosophy. The whole district cannot imagine how 4 children were able to get out at once. Get up early in the morning and think smartly. Study diligently, because this is the first thing, the basis of survival. Please write me often, and I promise to reply. I wish you from my heart the very best to all of you, to your Uncle Jonash and to his family. Happy Purim to our Jewish friends. So just as an aside, Uncle Jonash was the uncle, my grandfather's brother, who is here in Columbus, Ohio, who helped get them the affidavit of support. He and his son, my dad's cousin, were well established already in Columbus, and they helped to bring them out. And a note about my Uncle Martin, he was the examiner for the yeshiva. He would test the students as they studied the Gemara. And he had his own shoe store. So it was not that he was just a learned person, but he was also in business for himself. So when my dad and his siblings came to Columbus, believe it or not, there weren't that many immigrants in Columbus. And they were a bit of a sensation. Although there were Jews in Columbus, of course, this was a big deal, having people come directly from Europe into Columbus. And they were written up in a local newspaper. I'll just read the article, excerpt from it. It is hard to get a story from them, but it seems that with money they obtained from their 65-year-old father, they managed to go over the border into Italy and take a boat from there for this country. Herman is working for a scales manufacturing company and taking care of his sister Mary. A brother David was already here, and it was a happy reunion for the little family. Can you imagine, Mrs. Levinger, what America means to these refugees from Hitler's hate? We ought to be happy to live in a land which can receive these unfortunate people with open arms and say to them, here you are in a free country, remain in peace. Now, until end of 1941, they were still able to get letters from home. And so they were in touch, they were getting the news. Like I said, they would write who's getting married, who died, what's going on. And really, very interestingly, my grandfather was involved in several lawsuits because at a certain point in Hungary, every Jewish business needed to take on a Christian partner. And so one of the partners was assigned to take part in the farm. And this partner, the Sabo family, thought that not only it meant to be a partner in the farm, but it meant to be a partner in the produce of the farm. And to take the profit, take the money from the sale of anything that was grown. And so my grandfather took him to court and actually won, which I was very surprised that the judge agreed that they were not entitled to the produce of the farm. So I'm just going to read a letter now from the children's mother. This is my father's brother's wife now writing, and she's writing to her sister-in-laws, my aunts, who are now in Columbus. And she writes, Dear Hermine and dear Marie, Leosh is tired. Leosh is my dad's oldest brother. He came home late at night from Galoch. He handed over the horse and the other equipment. It was given over to the Hungarian army. Thank God that we are healthy. No news here, only the wind blows a lot. Dear Hermine, we are very happy to learn from your letter that you are sending us a package. I wish it would be here already. Let's hope that it will arrive. Many thanks for your good-heartedness. The children always mention you, and I would like, if you can, send us a picture so that the children would get to know you. Believe me, from early morning to late at night, I haven't stopped. It wouldn't be too bad if only the wind would stop blowing. Little Zoli, remember I mentioned there was one more child born, so little Zoli has a cold. Kisses to your Uncle Jonash, to Arthur, and to his family. Giussi and Mityu, right, the two children here are already older than this picture. Giussi and Mityu went to Hebrew school and took with them some food. Love from them also. Emil and Lenka are well and are in Hebrew school as well. So you can see, if you make out on the bottom of her letter, they were in Cheder. Emil and Lenku are well and they were in Cheder, so the Hebrew school. For my grandfather, he writes, with my love to my children, I want to inform you that thank God we are well, and I hope to hear from you the same. I want to let you know that the 236 pengo, $236, was received from my brother, and I thank you. It came in handy because I owed too many people. From the tobacco building, I took off the roof to fix the roof of the house. And because of that, I was delayed in writing you. I would like to sell that whole tobacco building, but if I can't, then I'll take it apart and sell it in pieces. We also had a little bit of seed so I can plant. I've given out for 1/3 of the land for the produce, mainly corn, potatoes, and beets. I was lucky that my son, your brother Leos, was still at home and plowed the land before he left. The horses are still at home, but for how long, I don't know. The horse had a little male colt, and it is out on the grazing land with its mother. My dearest Hermine, you asked me how I live. The same as before, in the front room. The cow did not give birth yet, and we missed the milk. Bread is scarce. We have 1 loaf of bread per week. I hope to do something about it. We did not have any wheat because we had to plow it under due to the frost. Last week in my dreams, you were at home. I wanted to speak to you, then I woke up. Many times I dream of all of you. With respect and kisses to all of you individually, forever. Your sincere father will never forget you. So by the end of 1941, you can see here from an envelope that mail was ended. You can see here on the bottom left, return to sender, service suspended. So at this point, they no longer had any communication with Europe. And we have a few letters where they were still sending money. And at a certain point, they couldn't send money even back home. But from my one cousin who did survive, we have this photograph from 1942. So Uncle Martin, again, going back to the first picture that I showed you, his son Emil survived, and he shared this picture with us of his father in Hungarian military uniform. The Jews were drafted, and my Uncle Martin was a soldier in World War I. So he received his rank. He was an officer. And his son tells a story that when he came home to visit them, he was wearing his uniform, and the non-Jews of the town didn't recognize him because obviously you see that here he has his beard, here he's clean shaven. They didn't recognize him, and they saluted him. And his son was amazed that here these non-Jews who were spitting and hating and not liking the Jews were saluting, not knowing that this was a Jew that had come back as a soldier. And so this is the picture was taken when his wife, Ethel, and 2 of his children came to visit him at the base where he was staying. And they would actually, in the letters, they said they brought him food, that it was very hard for him to keep kosher, but he was trying, and they were able to send packages within Hungary to where he was stationed. So let's go back to America, 1943. My dad joins the US Army. And so here's a picture of my dad, the first week of basic training. Again, a picture from before my dad as a young boy in Europe. And now he's a 21-year-old being sent from Columbus, Ohio to Camp Walters, Texas. And he did 12 weeks of basic training in Camp Walters, and then was sent to Pennsylvania awaiting overseas shipment. And then he became an American citizen, but not where you think. He became a citizen in Oran, Algeria. And so my dad would always joke he was the original African-American because he got his citizenship in Africa. And actually, that actually saved his life, in fact, because he arrived in North Africa the beginning of September 1943. If you know your military dates, the Battle of Sicily would take place just shortly after that. And he was kept back because he was not yet a citizen. He wasn't permitted to fight. So he was doing actually office work. He was processing replacements. And at the time, he didn't understand what a replacement was. Of course, he knew afterwards a replacement was taking the place of somebody who had been killed or injured in combat. So he was processing different soldiers through his office, and he had access to a typewriter. So some of his letters home were written with a typewriter. He was practicing his English. After all, he had been already in the United States for 3 years before shipping out. And he had to wait for a federal judge to arrive to North Africa to administer the oath of citizenship. And that happened in the beginning of December. And right after he became a citizen, after swearing to bear arms in defense of this country, he was sent to Naples as a combat infantryman. He was part of the U.S. Fifth Army, 1st Armored Division, the 6th Armored Infantry Battalion. This is their shoulder patch, and it was armored infantry. You can see the shoulder patch on his left shoulder here, and this was taken in that winter somewhere in Naples. So when he was sent to Naples, it was just before the Battle of Monte Cassino. Monte Cassino was a stronghold that the Germans had taken that overlooked Highway 6. Highway 6 led from basically north to Rome, and the Allies wanted to control this highway and get to Rome. To do that, they'd have to take Monte Trocchio, and then the Germans on the highest mount that was there, Monte Cassino. So we can just, here's a map of Italy. You can see, we'll just zoom in a little bit. You have Naples is here, you have Cassino, and this ridge of mountains goes across Italy. And so there are very few places that you can pass. One of them is Highway 6 that goes north. And again, like I said, Monte Cassino is overlooking Highway 6. So the Germans controlled this way north to Rome. And the green is called the Gustav Line. And so they were trying to break the Gustav Line, the Allies were. Atop Monte Cassino is an abbey. The abbey's walls were about 10 feet thick. And the abbey had been there for hundreds of years. The Germans took up positions in the abbey, even while the abbey was still operating. There were still monks at the abbey, but the Germans had guns placed on top and controlled all the high ground. So if you look, this is a picture, a modern picture looking south. You can see Monte Cassino here on the right, Monte Trocchio, and then in the distance, this small, relatively speaking, hill of Monte Porcia. This is now looking north. This is Monte Porcia, and this was considered a suicide mission to take this hill. On the right side of the hill is Highway 6, and the Germans were dug in all along this hill. Even as it was, you can see today, no trees on top. At the time, there were no trees as well. So anyone who was going to attack this hill, you can see this was all open ground. This was marshland. This was suicide. And this was my dad's first experience in combat from January 5th through January 14th, 1944. You can see this is some of the bombardment that took place at Monte Cassino. And to give you an idea of how difficult this battle was, this is what was left of the town of Cassino and the abbey on top after the Allies had bombarded it. So you can imagine what it must have sounded like and been like if you're there under bombardment 24 hours a day while the soldiers were there. So as I said, that was my dad's first experience of combat, January 5th through January 14th. When he was pulled back from the front lines, he said that his hands were so cold on the top of Monte Porcia. Had the Germans counterattacked, he wouldn't have been able to do anything. It was useless. His hands were frozen. But he was pulled back, and for about a week, a little bit over a week, he was the group was reorganized. His unit was reorganized, and they were sent to a place which most people don't know even or remember was the invasion of Anzio. So everyone talked about the invasion of Normandy, but there was before Normandy was Anzio. And let's just go to the map. So here we have Monte Cassino on the map, and Anzio is a beach town and halfway almost between Cassino and Rome. And so basically what it was a surprise attack by the Americans. They went by sea from Naples around the front where my dad had just fought at Cassino. They went by sea around and landed at Anzio. This was an amphibious landing. It was really not, it was really Churchill's idea. Churchill was very much in favor of doing it. And the Allies were only half-hearted. And so they thought that it would be a method of withdrawing some soldiers from the Gustav Line, bringing them back and allowing the attack on Cassino to go through so they could control Highway 6. It was a diversion. That's what they had hoped it would be, at least. This is a photograph from the landing. It was a surprise. Actually, the Germans did not expect any landing here. And so there was very, very little resistance on the first day. It happens to be, though, by the second day, the Germans got their act together and started pouring in soldiers to be ready for the counterattack, to hold the Allies at the beachhead. And within 2 days, there were 70,000 soldiers ready to defend that beachhead. This is a photograph of how they would unload tanks and soldiers from the landing craft at the port of Naples, port of Anzio, sorry. So the Allies landed 36,000 soldiers on the first day. And this, again, shows how much of a surprise it was. There was very little resistance. They were able to land, but they were stuck there for 4 months. They did not leave the beachhead. They were maybe made a mile and a half inroads, and the Germans held the line, but it was effective in pulling soldiers off of the German soldiers off of the Cassino line. So it did do part of what the Allies had hoped. unfortunately, because the Americans were not fully committed to this in the way that Churchill had hoped, they spent the first 2 or 3 days when they could have done something, loading more and more equipment onto the beachhead rather than going out and taking different offensive positions. And there were actually the Albini Hills, which they could have gotten in the first 2 or 3 days of combat, which had they taken, it's very well the war could have been ended 4 months, well, not the war, but at least a major victory would have taken place 4 months before Normandy, because because the Germans were so surprised by it, it would have cut off the entire supply route for the Germans at Cassino. After the end of the 4 months, there were 33,200 Allied combat casualties. I mean, the numbers are just staggering when you think about it. That's why I said in the beginning, think about numbers. So here, 33,000. We said your township has 10,000. 3 days, there were 4 months of combat, and we're not even anything near the number of victims of the Holocaust. Again, after 4 months, my dad was part of the units that entered Rome. They captured Rome on June 4th, 1944. And just a picture of seeing what ground they had conquered. What took them 4 months to go. My dad said they probably could have gotten there faster just by digging underground. What was going on in Europe at the same time? So basically, again, my dad was in combat at Anzio from January until June. March 1944, Miklos Horthy, the leader of Hungary, was arrested by Germany. Until this time, although the Jews of Hungary were suffering, right? Like I said, they had to have Christian partners. They were already being put into restrictions, many restrictions on them, but they were still alive. And the Germans were not allowed to come into Hungary until they arrested Miklos Horthy. And at that point, the situation for the Jews in Hungary changed drastically. Within 2 months, their lives would be changed. On April 1944, the Nazis entered the small village that my family lived in and rounded up all the Jews that were there, including my great-grandmother, grandfather, aunts, uncles, and cousins, and they were taken to a town called Sátoraljaújhely in Hungary. This was a holding town. It was not a concentration camp where they were being injured, but of course there was not much food. They were packed together in small apartments, and they were also, all their possessions were confiscated. So whatever was brought with them, they needed to turn over to the Hungarian gendarme, the Hungarian police, the collaborators, if you will, of the Nazis. So this is a confiscation document that we were able to find that has my Uncle Martin's signature on it. And it says, Martin Schwartz, resident of Curie Helmets, has the following items: 490 pengo, like dollars, cash, a pair of gold earrings with jewels, 1-piece gold diamond ring, 1-piece silver graduation ring belonging to his daughter Magda. Remember, if you recall, his daughter with the brace on her leg from polio. A 1-piece nickel pocket watch, Alpina brand. And you can see, if you can make it out here, his signature, Martin Schwartz. Less than 1 month later, the Nazis forced my family onto cattle cars and took them by train. So this was on May 10th. One of my Uncle Martin's sons was a baby, and he died actually on the train before it left. They were loaded onto the train car, and before the train left out, because there were so many people forced onto the train, he died on the train. And his brother, my cousin Emil, says that he was the child's body was handed out of the train to be removed, and that was the end of him. And I'm actually named after him and our same grandfather. And they arrived at Auschwitz 4 days later. And we do know these things as facts, and I'll show you later, because everything, unfortunately, the Nazis were very good at documenting, and they documented this as well. So you can see here's a town in Hungary, Sátoraljaújhely. They were taken by train to Auschwitz. Those that arrived on the first day, they were gassed on that first day, and those that survived selection were taken to other labor camps, and we'll see that they were taken to Austria. So I'm going to now read a letter from my cousin Emil, the only survivor, and this is his first letter that he wrote after being liberated, and he's writing to my dad and my dad's siblings in the United States, and this is a picture of Emil shortly thereafter, and again his father, Uncle Martin. And he writes to them using their Yiddish names. So I'm sorry, but dear Henshu, Mariska Mendu Yitzchak, until 120. Before I begin to write to you, I will introduce myself to you. My name is Emil, your cousin, Martin Schwartz's son. I know you because you came to our home when you went to America on the farewell evening. I will now tell you about my dear parents and brothers and sisters. On April 4th, 1944, they dragged us to a concentration camp. We thought we would be all together as a family. On May 10th, they marched us to a railroad boxcar. We were 94 of us in the one cattle boxcar. There was no air, no water in the closed boxcar. After 4 days of travel, we arrived to Auschwitz, the famous extermination camp. They have driven us from the train, and immediately we stood in line. It didn't take more than 10 minutes, and they have separated us. As I look back, I saw my dear mother and children on the other side, my dear father, Hirshu, my brother, and I on the other side. Poor Magda cried. Without saying goodbye, we have not seen each other after that. Within 2 days, they took all 3 of us in a transport to Austria to a concentration camp. We worked there for 3 months. Within that period, Hirshu, my brother, was taken with a sick transport. From that point, there was no news of him. My dear father couldn't take it any longer. 2 days before Hanukkah, he died in front of my eyes. This difficult event, one cannot imagine. At that moment, I have lost my desire to live. I knew that my mother was burned at the gas chamber in Auschwitz, but I didn't want that from our family no one should return home. After that, I began to suffer. I don't remember the exact time when we were freed. Before being freed and during that time, I was very sick and very weak. I was bedridden with typhoid. Later, I was taken by the Americans to a hospital, and in 1 month, I became well completely. With the first train transport, I came back home to Helmets. I am staying with my cousin, Zoltan Polak. I'm sure that you know him. From Mrs. Lenkis's family, Hirshu, Henshu, and Yiddish survived. From the Polak family, only Zola remained. We were together with your brother Leosh in Auschwitz. There, he volunteered for masonry, and there's no news of him from that point. I do not have any more to write. I would ask all of you of one favor. If you can secure or send me a visa, because I'm under 17. And have no one, no relations allowed. My birth information is as follows. Emil Schwartz, August 13th, 1929, born in Curie Helmets, out of a pure heart and kinship, an embrace from your cousin, Emil Schwartz. I'm enclosing 2 pictures in this letter. So here are photographs taken by the Nazis of a Hungarian transport in May 1944 being unloaded. This is very rare photographs that you can see the actual process of what they had done. I'm just going to go through it slowly and quietly, and you can let my cousin's description tell you what's transpiring. You can see also that many of the people are aware of the photographer. You can see in their eyes that they're watching and looking at the photographer. And as my cousin testified, within minutes, the trains were cleared. So for my family that were murdered in Auschwitz, my grandfather, and I would also ask, look at the ages that I've placed next to their names, because I think that's also very relevant. My grandfather, my aunt Etelka, who was my father's brother's wife, and her children that we saw pictures of, Emil, Miklos, Gyula, and Zoltan. My dad's cousins, Miksha Shon and Mariska Gluck Shon, and their children, Tibi and Clara. My grandmother, Chaya Schwartz, my aunt Ethel Lefkowitz Schwartz, and her children, Magna, which we recall from the initial picture, Samuel, Lily, Leib, and Zissel Schwartz. So as my cousin testified, they were taken to a concentration camp in Austria. The camp is Mauthausen. When you think of Mauthausen as being one place, but it was not one place. And I think that this picture is emblematic of many of the concentration camps. We think of them as one name only, but in fact, they were spread out over the entire country. And so Mauthausen, which you can see up here, was one part of a complex called the Mauthausen complex, including Gusen and Ebensee. And we'll see why I have those circled in a moment. Let's talk a little about Nazi record keeping. As I said before, the Nazis were meticulous at keeping records. This is an original transport created by the Nazis in Mauthausen, noting prisoner arrivals from Auschwitz in May 1944. You can see my Uncle Leosh's name appears on line 24. Number 247. Gluck Leosh, his birth date, November 13th, 1904. From Bodvog Mezio, their village name, as a worker, Arbeiter. And the number he was given was 68247. This is another transport list created on May 29th, noting the prisoners that were transferred from Auschwitz to Mauthausen-Gusen. You can see my uncle's name, Martin Schwartz, also from Curie Helmets, born 1895, June 20th, also as a worker. And his number is 67445. My cousin Emil's name appears on the same list on line 489. You can barely make it out, but it says Emil Schwartz from Curie Helmets. And his brother's name, Bela Schwartz from Curie Helmets, his birth date, May 15th, 1926. His number is 67553. So again, Nazis were really good about keeping track. These are also original lists of arrivals to Mauthausen. And just zooming in on each lane, my Uncle Martin, his sons, Emil and Bella. Now, Bela Schwartz is a Yiddish name, Herschel. We'll talk about in a moment. But my dad's oldest brother, Leosh, was murdered in Mauthausen-Ebensee concentration camp. He was assigned number 68247. He was murdered on October 9th, 1944. How do we know this? Well, again, Nazis were really good. The daily status report from Mauthausen, September 10th, 1944, noting the prisoners who were transferred to Kalksteinburg work. My Uncle Leosh's name appears on line 46. Leosh Gluck, Bodrog Mezio, his birth date, November 13th, 1904. His number, 68247, Hungarian Jew. On September 12th, his transfer to the subcamp of Zement. My Uncle Leosh's name, 68247 on line 117. The daily status report, noting names of prisoners who died. And you can see my Uncle Leosh Gluck's name, Hungarian Jew, on line 3. His prisoner number, 68247. His birth date, and where this was in Mauthausen. Again, the prisoner number register created by the authorities in Mauthausen. And my uncle's name appears here, Leosh Gluck. This is signifying his death date, October 9th, 1944, and a line crossing through his name, signifying that he's no longer available as a prisoner. The Mauthausen-Ebensee death book for my Uncle Leosh. I'll just zoom in. You can see Leosh Gluck, his death date, death time. He died from sepsis, according to the Nazi authorities, and his death certificate. This is, you can see, Hungarian Jew, Leosh Gluck, his number, 68247, from Bodrog Mezio, signed by the Block Führer, the leader of the block. I mean, this was like, they were keeping track of everything. And I'm every time I look at this, I'm blown away, because in Mauthausen, they had over 200,000 prisoners that had been processed through there. And when the Nazis realized they were losing, they started burning all the documents. So less than 10,000 documents remain. And of those, of my family. It's just really, really extraordinary to have. My Uncle Martin Schwartz was transferred to Mauthausen-Gusen concentration camp, assigned number 67445. He was murdered on December 9th, 1944. And this is the Mauthausen-Gusen death book. You can see the entry on the top, Martin Schwartz. We'll just zoom in. Martin Schwartz from Kirai Helmets. His number, Hungarian Jew, his birth date, and his date of death. His death certificate as well. It's hard to make out, but you can see Martin Schwartz, Kirai Helmets, and his number 67445. Again, I don't know who this Block Führer is, but his family should see his signature and know what he was involved in. Now, as I said, we're going to come back to my Uncle Martin's son, Herschel. And Herschel, as my cousin Emil wrote, was with them for about 3 months and then was taken on a sick transport somewhere, and they didn't know where it was. And again, the Nazis were really good at keeping records. And a researcher at the US Holocaust Museum, when I explained what we knew, went back again and tried to search. And she actually was very, very diligent, and I thank her very much, because she checked all transports leaving from Mauthausen back to Auschwitz. What did she find? A transfer list with Bela Schwartz on line 375, confirming his transfer, as my cousin remembered, back to Auschwitz in August. So again, May, arriving in May, June, July, August. So exactly confirming what my cousin remembered. My first cousin Lenke, as you notice, I didn't mention her in the previous slide because her aunt testifies. This is my dad's brother's sister-in-law testifies that she died after the camp that she was in was liberated, and she was 12 years old. So 1945, where was my dad while this was going on? Again, my dad joined the army and volunteered because he wanted to save his family. So what was he doing? After combat in Anzio, he was pulled back in July, August of 1944. His unit was reorganized, and he traded his combat jacket for a doctor's signature to get him out of combat. And he was transferred to a 67th Military Police Unit, they were looking for combat veterans to transport German prisoners as lands were being liberated in France and Germany, to transport German prisoners back to France to help clean up. So these are the medals and awards that my dad had received. The most important and one that he felt everyone should know was the Combat Infantry Badge. You only get that if you served in direct combat with the enemy. And so he felt that people would always say, Jews were not in the front, and let people know that Jews were definitely in the front, and he was one of them. If you receive the Combat Infantry Badge, then years later, the government said you could receive the Bronze Star Medal. And so he received that. He also received the Good Conduct Medal, American Campaign Medal, World War II Victory Medal. The next one with the European, African, Middle Eastern Campaign Medal with 5 Bronze Stars signifies 5 major areas of combat. His unit, again, because it was a suicidal mission, his unit received a Presidential Unit Citation for the action at Monteporcia. And as with his unit, with the 67th MP Division, bringing German prisoners back to France, using trains, by carrying them by train, was meritorious unit commendation. So he and the other American soldiers were stationed on the outside of the train, guarding to make sure that the German prisoners did not escape. He also received the Marksmanship Qualification Badge and Sharpshooter. Now, my dad didn't know whether he would live or die. This is his chow cup. This is what he ate and drank from for the 3 years that he was in the army. And because he didn't know whether he would live or die, he wanted to leave something behind if he were killed. So with his knife, he engraved in his chow cup his history. And so you see on the front of the chow cup the emblem of the 1st Armored Division, and he writes 6th Armored Infantry, that he came to Ohio in 1940. If we turn the cup, we'll turn the cup to the side, you see his name, Irving Gluck. And on the side, he etched in where he was. So he left from Czechoslovakia to Hungary, to Yugoslavia, Germany, Italy, Morocco, Gibraltar, Portugal, Lisbon, Spain, New York, and Ohio. This is how he came to America. Continuing as a soldier, back to Africa, he was in Oran, and to Italy, Naples, Cassino, Anzio, Rome, Leghorn, Florence, and Pisa. That was from 1943 to 44. And in France, Marseille and Dijon. And we go to the other side of the cup. Also in France, to Nancy, Paris, and in Germany, he was in Worms, Kaiserslautern, Mannheim, Heilbronn, Speyer, Ball, Eagleheim, Chamarade back in France, finally Le Havre to take the Liberty ship home and back to the USA. And I remember as a child, my dad carved in, he said, I forgot to put in that I made it home. So he carved in USA many, many years later. You see a picture of my dad holding his chow cup here. This is my dad and some of the fellows in his unit. Now, as I said, just my dad's cousin, Emil, survived. He returned to Hungary and then immigrated to Palestine. And I think he did that in 1950, but he had already joined the IDF in Europe and had done part of his service in Europe. And then when he got to Israel, he served in the IDF in Tzfat. This was again, another identification card from Mauthausen. It's an original card showing my cousin, so Emil Schwartz, his birthday in Curie Helmets, his father, Uncle Martin, and Ethel, formerly Lefkowitz, transferred from Auschwitz to Gusen. What's not recorded here is that from Gusen, he was transferred to Gunskirchenlager, which was liberated by the 71st Infantry Division. And the division actually left a record of what they found. And it's a booklet, which I recommend reading. Obviously, I can't read all of it to you now. And the pictures are unfortunately very, very graphic. So I wouldn't want to show them if there are children watching. But I think to read the pamphlet, to see what he went through and what he testifies to much later in life is very eye-opening. But what I will do is I will read from the Major General of the 71st Division that wrote the foreword for this booklet. It says, the damning evidence against the Nazi war criminals found at Gunskirchenlager is being recorded in this booklet in the hope that the lessons learned in Germany will not soon be forgotten by the democratic nations or the individual men who fought to wipe out a government built on hate, greed, race myths, and murder. This is a true record. I saw Gunskirchenlager myself before the 71st Division had initiated its merciful task of liberation. The horror of Gunskirchen must not be repeated. A permanent, honest record of the crimes committed there will serve to remind all of us in future years that the freedom and privileges we enjoy in a democratic nation must be jealously guarded and protected. Willard Wyman, Major General USA, commanding 71st Infantry Division. And I think it's important to know that these things exist. So when people stand up and say, oh, it didn't happen, that there were and are still maybe a few American soldiers who witnessed it with their own eyes and testified at the time what they saw. This is my cousin Emil with his wife Lily, his two sons, Misha and Dudi, and their wives and their grandchildren and great-grandchildren. So that even from one person, we can start over with the hope and that things will get better, which is, when we say Kaddish, that's what we're saying. We still believe in this enterprise of who we are and what we believe in. Now, a story about my dad. Here's a picture of someone that you haven't seen through this presentation. In between my dad serving as a combat infantryman and then being transferred to an MP in the 67th MP, he served in a military PX in Naples. A PX was like a CVS, if you will, where you could buy chocolate and candy and soda and drinks and whatnot. And he was serving as, I guess, the stock boy / manager, and he would give out candy to the Italian children. The children would play soccer, they would kick the ball, and every once in a while, my dad had extra candy, he would give it to one of the children. So fast forward to like 1973, I'm a little child here in Long Island, we went to the pizzeria. And I was excited and I was carrying my slice of pizza from the counter to the table and my slice of pizza fell on the floor. So the pizza man came over and rushed down and picked up the slice of pizza and looked up at my dad and said, I know you. My dad thought through his day and he said, I really don't recognize you. I don't know you at all. And the man said, you gave me candy. I was a child in Naples and you gave me candy. And so from the perspective, kneeling on the floor, I looked up and recognized my dad. And really an extraordinary thing. You could see this as many, many years later, they remained friends. We went to that pizzeria almost every week to visit with him. And he's like an uncle to us, to my children as well. And we're always thrilled to see him because this is a connection to my dad and human nature, I think, to show the goodness in people when we want to see goodness. I end with this usually with the schools that I go to. for the children to understand that life is sacred because we're each unique, we're different, we're irreplaceable. And when you celebrate our differences with dignity and acceptance and respect, you get a story like that. You get a story where human beings who are different, who go to different, one goes to a church, one goes to synagogue, we can tolerate and respect one another and be friends and go through life in a better way. For those of you who did not read the story, this is my dad's story, written by me in his voice. He approved it before he died. So I know I've gotten most of the facts as close as I could. But even more importantly, coming soon is the book of my family's letters, which is basically more than 2,000 letters from 70 different letter writers, non-Jewish, Jewish, my dad's neighbors in Europe, friends, family, extended family, those who survived, those who didn't survive, from children, from just, again, it's 70 people, all interconnected, all in their own words, written at the time. And so you can get a real sense of what it was in 1938, the hope of being able to leave Europe, the struggle of one cousin trying to get out of Romania and begging my Uncle David to help her. And what could he do? He was a poor immigrant, but he was already in America and she was hopeful. And you're getting the perspective of the non-Jews and the perspective of those who returned from the camps and their interaction with the non-Jews in the town. It's an extraordinary thing. And this is basically covered everything that we have donated to the Holocaust Museum in Washington. I thank you again for having me, Inbar. Thank you for putting this together. I would be happy to answer any questions if you have any questions. But let me stop sharing my screen. And yeah, so again, thank you. And
thank you so much. What an incredible story. You and I spoke a little bit before everybody came on, and there's a lot of stories that kind of overlap and a lot of things that you have actually said that corroborate some things that I had heard in my grandmother's story while she was in Yugoslavia. They were part of the Austro-Hungarian Empire and at one point fell under Hungarian rule. And I remember one story where you were talking about how they collected all of their belongings. And she had said that she had a watch that her father had given her. He had passed away before the war, and she refused to give it to them. And so she ended up throwing it into the river rather than giving it over to the people who were going to destroy her family. So a lot of those stories really come together for me, being from that same part of the world. So absolutely phenomenal. You did an amazing job with the book. Those of you who've read it, I know Michelle, who runs our book club, actually did a book club on the story just this past Wednesday. Michelle, if you want to just kind of hop on here and tell us a little bit about how that went. You're on mute.
We chose the book because we knew we were having this program. So the book club members decided to read the book ahead of time. And we were all so impressed. Everyone loved the book. Everyone felt it was so warm and heart-wrenching and told such a wonderful story. And everyone was impressed with the pictures and the documentation. I think that most of us are on, I think, and maybe they'd want to share their own perspective of it. But it was a wonderful discussion that we had privately. It was wonderful.
Wonderful. I'm so glad to hear it. I really do enjoy hearing it because I don't always get the feedback. And especially when I give most presentations, it's the children. So I'm trying to open their eyes and to get them to see something that they never thought about. So I'm glad from an adult perspective that you enjoyed it. Thank you.
Yeah, I think that's really important. And I'm very thankful to you allowing me to record this presentation because as I said, we do have our Hebrew school. Holocaust education has become incredibly important to us here at Lev Academy. And I'll be able to share this presentation with them as well. It's very eye-opening to see their perspectives change as they hear these firsthand accounts from people who actually who live it. I'm also just blown away by the number of documents that you have. I know we don't have very much from my grandmother's side of all this. So to be able to see all of these things for yourself is truly incredible. I'm going to open up the floor to anybody who has any questions or if anybody wants to say anything. If you were on the book club on Wednesday and you want to chime in, feel free to unmute yourself and say anything, ask anything.
Yeah, I'd like to say I was in the book club and read your book, enjoyed it immensely. But I want to go into this documentation a little further. It's incredible how many documents that you have, and how did you get that? Obviously, they were saved by someone, and the photos also. Was it? It looks like a yeoman's task to assemble all of them. Can you tell us?
It really, yeah, I'll share a little bit about the story. It happened to be that, as I said, my dad and his sisters and brother lived in Columbus. And when my aunt came to New York, she left everything in Columbus. And then my other aunt came to New York and left everything in Columbus. And eventually it was just the two brothers who were in Columbus, and the box of letters that was there was just there. And nobody had really disturbed it. When they came to New York, they brought it with them, and it remained in a box. And it actually stayed in our basement for many, many years. And my Aunt Marie one day was bored, and my dad said, "Hey, you know what? I have an idea. Why don't you go through these letters and see what's in the box and sort through it?" And my aunt started going through these letters, and she would show a few of them to my dad and say, "Hey, look at this letter." These were letters that they had written themselves, or it was from their father. And she started organizing it. I'm sure you all remember the old photo albums, the magnetic photo albums. So she would place these really delicate letters in these magnetic photo albums. And my wife and I saw that eventually, and we said, "You can't do that. These are going to ruin these letters." So we started undoing all her work and putting them into archival sleeves. That made it much more accessible for them to look at the letters, because now you could hold on to this letter in a thick plastic sleeve and really look at it closely and read it. So my dad started reading to myself and to my children a few of the letters, really the ones that he became very emotional reading and thought were very poignant. And I said, "Dad, if you don't do something with this, they're going to be lost." So I taught him how to use the computer, and at the time it was a program called Via Voice, and he would sit there and translate the letter and produce a file that we could work with to read. If somebody was interested in reading a letter, I could say, "Look at this really neat letter. It's written, my grandfather wrote it, and here's the translation. Let me read it to you." And this was quite a number of letters. My dad and my aunt, they were both already in their 90s, learned how to use the computer and do this. And they translated about, I would say, 200 letters that my aunt had organized and tried to keep everything together the way she remembered they ought to be. And then they became ill. They weren't able to translate more. And I said, "You know what? This is really, it's an amazing, amazing thing, but we need to translate the rest of them." And so I found somebody that was willing to work with me, and we translated those letters. And as you go through the letters, you're finding, well, this is a document, this document is here, this document is there, it belongs to the letters. And through this whole period, my dad had very early on, even as a soldier, he had made requests with the Red Cross to find out what had happened to his family. And they would respond, so maybe he made the request in 1945, they responded in 46 and 48. And so we had a lot of letters from the Red Cross. And I remember in the early 90s, when East and West Germany were reunited, my dad said, "Let's try asking again." So we had filled out more paperwork, and they really didn't find very much. Fast forward to internet age, I put a request in with the U.S. Holocaust Museum. And because of all the letters, I became more familiar with what to ask and where they were from, dates, when were they taken, where might they have been taken to. And so the request to the Holocaust Museum was much more specific than what they had made before. And it also coincided with, they had the archives in Baden-Baden that were opened up. So the researchers of the Holocaust Museum were able to find a lot of these records. And as they found more, we were able to now find more, because we knew, as I said during the presentation, my cousin's brother, we knew when they arrived. So it gave a starting point for the researcher to say, "Okay, let me look at all the trains that were taken from Mauthausen back to Auschwitz and see if we can find the same names with the same birthdays." And so little by little we accumulated, but a lot of the documents were really from, I would say, at least 2008 onward. The letters certainly were kept in this box in the basement all these years, and we started going through them, I would say 2006, 2005, 6, before we started really attacking it. As far as the other documentation, I think my dad just coming to America with nothing, everything became important. So he saved. We have the ship tickets. We have the train tickets when they left Europe. I know exactly what train they were on, what time the train left Budapest, and it went through Trieste because he saved all of that. And it took a while to figure out what it is that I was actually looking at, because you see things and wait a second, is this saying what I think it's saying? And sure enough, it was. And all of these things will actually be available online through the Holocaust Museum. It's going to be one of their special collections that because they like Inbar said, most people don't have this. Most people have the story that their family member told in their 70s or 80s without any documentation from their family, maybe a few pictures here and there. But we have not only the letters from the children, the tickets, the ship tickets, the V-mail that my dad sent home, the military letters. Just you don't have a complete documentation like this. So we're.
It's truly amazing. Absolutely amazing. Anybody else?
Can you folks hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I'm coming up as the black box of Gina Tong.
Yes.
Clearly, I'm not Gina Tong. She is my dear wife. I have the privilege of being a neighbor, and I take the liberty of saying a friend of Sherwin Gluck's. And I just want to attest to the Herculean effort that he spent the days, weeks, months, and years putting all this together. We talked about it during this time. I hope that anything I said might have contributed in a minuscule way to, if nothing else, giving him encouragement to continue. It's quite remarkable. And it was amazing to just witness from the side some of it and have the pleasure of discussing some of this with him as the process was going on. I had the privilege of knowing his father, Irv. Sorry, you get a little verklempt. Dear man, who would be very proud of his son. So, yeah, sorry for that. That's really the main thing I want to say. Sherwin's a very special human being. Happy to know him.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I can't even imagine how long it took for you to put this whole thing together. I'm trying to wrap my head around trying to get more information from my own family. As I said, she did do the Holocaust video through Steven Spielberg, so we do have it. It is in Serbian. So I have to have it translated for my children, but I would love to see if there was any other documentation that we can possibly find. And I know it's an incredible effort to
really what you need the starting point for that, and for everyone who's watching, if you want to know more, it's just like I looked up your township. Knowing where your town is and knowing what your township is helps you to find a lot of information. So if you know where your family was from, if you can find a town on a map and then find out what district that was, it's very helpful.
Yeah, I think my mother has a lot more of that information if she's planning on doing a trip to Serbia at some point in the coming couple of years to try to see if she can sort of retrace some of those footsteps. But
right.
Truly an incredible story.
If you have that, then certainly the Holocaust Museum can help to find information. And especially because, like I said, in Baden-Baden, once they opened up those records to outside researchers, that's when a lot of the information came forward, because we really did not have, we had none of these the Nazi documents for certain. We had none of that until about 2008, 2010.
Yeah, I think part of the thing is trying to grasp with what you find out. I mean, as you could all see, and I could see it very clearly, how emotional you get when you read the letters. When there's something that really strikes a nerve, it never, ever seems to go away. You could read it a million times. You can see the pictures a million times, and it will still make you emotional every single time. It never gets any easier. So,
yes,
yeah,
that is very true. And and I think when you read the bulk of the letters, which is it's a very hard task, because like I said, there are about 2,000 letters. And it's like peeling back the skin of an onion. It's not, you're not going to get a story right away. You have to read it, and you feel the vice closing in on them. And because there's this blank, right? You know what happened through 1941, and then whatever happened in Europe stops until 1945, until the first letters from the survivors come. And so you know, because of everyone else's books, what everyone's talked about, you know what happened. And then you start reading it again, and it's especially the first letters when they come back from the camps. They're, like your small town. I think I looked at only 2,000 residents or thereabout, which is similar to some of these larger towns where my dad was living near. And some of the survivors would come back and they would say, this family is gone, this family is gone. From this family, you have so many, this, and this survived. And they have pages of this, like they remembered all their neighbors and who survived and who came back. Very, very extraordinary and moving. And I read through it sometimes very quickly without always stopping and saying, this is an entire family that's been wiped out. So it actually, I was reviewing last night with my wife, and you look at the pictures and these